The galaxy had rules long before humanity ever learned how to leave its cradle. They were not written rules, not carved into stone or encoded into law. They were older than language, older than the first interstellar empires. They were understood truths, shaped by extinction and survival, enforced by those who had lived long enough to remember the cost of defiance. Power was inherited. A strength was visible. And those who appeared weak were consumed. The concord of sovereigns, what most species simply called the concord, was the final expression of those rules. A galactic council composed of empires so ancient their origin myths had fossilized into religion. They had risen, conquered, nearly destroyed one another, and finally settled into a brutal equilibrium. Borders were maintained not by peace, but by fear of retaliation. Species survived by proving, over and over, that harming them would be expensive. When humanity arrived, they did none of that. They emerged quietly. No grand declaration echoed across the stars. No fleets of ceremonial warships carved their path through contested space. No conquered systems, no shattered rivals left as warnings. Humanity appeared first as a whisper in long-range sensor logs, unidentified warp signatures flickering at the edge of explored territory. Then as a curiosity, a handful of star systems, modest in scale, emitting communications that were polite. Requests for trade. Requests for recognition. Requests for boundaries. The Concord noticed them the way a storm notices a candle. At first there was mild interest. A bipedal mammalian species from a yellow star system, short-lived, fragile, chemically driven propulsion for intrasystem travel, only recently achieving stable faster-than-light jumps. Their ships were functional but unremarkable. Their weapons were inefficient by galactic standards, projectiles, plasma, fusion warheads, effective against themselves, perhaps, laughable against shields that had been refined over tens of thousands of years. Humanity was classified within 3 cycles. A Tier 7 civilization. Limited threat potential. No strategic value. And that should have been the end of it. But the Concord was not a place where things were simply ignored. It was a place where weakness attracted attention, not always immediately, but inevitably. The first to test humanity were the Varkeen clades. The Varkeen were scavenger kings, an old species that had survived by orbiting the empires rather than challenging them. They specialized in exploiting the gaps, border systems, unclaimed trade routes, minor civilizations too insignificant to warrant protection. Their fleets were lean, cruel, and optimized for intimidation rather than prolonged war. When Varkeen long-range sensors detected human colonies expanding beyond their initial cluster, they saw opportunity. Unprotected worlds, minimal orbital defenses, a species that believed treaties mattered. The first Varkeen incursion was small. A single flotilla entered the human system designated Haven Reach. They broadcast demands for tribute, mineral rights, population labor quotas, exclusive trade control. Humanity responded with a delay of nearly 11 hours. Then a message, clear, calm, translated into Varkeen trade cant with almost embarrassing precision. This system is recognized as human sovereign territory. You are in violation of established boundaries. Please withdraw immediately to avoid unnecessary loss of life. The Varkeen commanders laughed. They had heard similar words from dozens of species over the centuries. The weak always spoke of loss of life. They never specified whose. The flotilla advanced. They destroyed a human mining platform as a demonstration. The platform did not fire back. Escape pods were launched. The Varkeen let them go. Terror was more valuable than bodies. When the human response finally came, it was disappointing. 3 ships. That was all. 3 human warships translated into the system at extreme range. Their hulls were blocky, asymmetrical, no decorative architecture, no visible energy buildup, no intimidation displays. The Varkeen did not even bother raising full shields. The engagement lasted 6 minutes. Later analysis by Concorde observers, yes, the Concorde watched, even if it pretended not to care, described the battle as confusing. The human ships did not fight aggressively. They did not pursue fleeing Varkeen vessels. Their weapons were precise, targeted almost exclusively at engines and weapon arrays. They disabled rather than annihilated. When the Varkeen flotilla retreated, limping and furious, the 3 human ships did not follow. They simply transmitted another message. This is your final warning. Do not return. The Varkeen clades did not return. Not because they were afraid, but because they were embarrassed. Losing ships to a Tier 7 species was a stain on their reputation. They reported the encounter as an unexpected defensive anomaly and quietly adjusted their projections. Within the Concorde, the incident registered as a footnote. Humanity had defended itself. That was unusual, perhaps, but not alarming. Plenty of minor species managed one successful defense before collapsing under sustained pressure. The true measure was time. And over the next several cycles, humanity did something far more dangerous than winning a battle. They endured. Their colonies multiplied, slowly, methodically. Their trade networks expanded, not through force, but through reliability. Human merchants honored contracts with near-religious dedication. Human diplomats listened more than they spoke. They accepted unfavorable trade ratios without complaint, preferring stability over dominance. When their ships were harassed, they documented. When their systems were probed, they reinforced quietly. When provoked, they responded just enough to survive and never more. To the Concorde, this behavior was baffling. Strength was meant to be displayed. Deterrence was meant to be obvious. A species that hid its capabilities invited extinction. The prevailing theory became simple. Humans were cautious because they were weak. They survived because no one had bothered to crush them yet. That belief solidified during the Karos arbitration. The Karos were a militant empire, ancient and proud, their war doctrine unchanged for millennia. When a border dispute arose between Karos' expansion fleets and a string of human frontier systems, the matter was brought before the Concorde, less out of respect, more out of theater. The Karos' representative towered over the human env in the council chamber, chitinous armor gleaming beneath the artificial starlight. These systems lie within our projected expansion corridor, the Karos declared. Your presence is an inefficiency. The human envoy did not argue history, did not threaten retaliation, did not even raise their voice. They presented charts, settlement dates, migration paths, energy output forecasts. They proposed a compromise, shared access, phased development, mutual non-aggression. The council observed with detached amusement. The Karos refused. Within 2 cycles, Karos warships entered the disputed systems. They dismantled human orbital stations. They seized transport vessels. They issued evacuation orders that were, in practice, death sentences. The Concord watched. Humanity appealed for arbitration again. Denied. The reasoning was simple. The Karos were powerful. Humanity was not. Intervening would destabilize existing balances. So humanity did what weak species always did. They retreated. Colonies were evacuated with remarkable efficiency. Entire populations relocated without panic. Ships withdrew in orderly formations, not a single desperate last stand, not a single act of vengeance. The Karos took the systems without resistance, and the galaxy learned its lesson. Humans would not fight if the cost was too high. Humans would choose survival over pride. Humans were not a threat. That belief spread. Traders became less cautious, raiders more daring. Accidental border violations increased. Human protests were filed, logged, and ignored. Yet still, humanity did not collapse. They consolidated their territory inward. They reduced their expansion rate. Their military ship production, according to observable metrics, remained modest. No massive fleet buildups, no superweapons, no aggressive alliances. Behind closed doors of the Concord, some found this unsettling. How do they keep absorbing losses? One delegate asked during a closed session. Any other species would fracture. They are mammals, another replied dismissively. Social cohesion is a survival trait. It will break eventually. But eventually never came. Instead, something else happened. Human space became quiet. Trade lanes rerouted themselves subtly, favoring human logistics hubs. Human shipyards, while few, operated with astonishing efficiency. Ships entered and exited dry dock faster than projected. Materials were recycled at rates that defied standard economic models. And most disturbingly, human exploration beyond their borders slowed to nearly nothing. They were no longer expanding. They were preparing. The Concord did not notice the shift until it was too late. The trigger was insignificant by galactic standards. A minor power, the Zelth Combine, launched a punitive expedition against a human research outpost located near a pulsar. The outpost was small, non-military. Its destruction would not even register as a statistic. The Zelth commander followed protocol, one warning transmission, a countdown, then orbital bombardment. The outpost was annihilated. There were no escape pods. For the first time in recorded interstellar history, humanity did not respond with diplomacy. They did not file a protest. They did not request arbitration. They did not retreat. They went silent. For 6 standard week. Nothing happened. Then, on the edge of Zelth-controlled space, every deep-range sensor array recorded the same impossible event. A gravitational distortion. Not a warp signature, not hyperspace. Something else. The distortion expanded, folded, and then space itself seemed to open. And from that impossible wound in reality, a single human vessel emerged. It was larger than anything humanity had ever fielded before. Larger than some Concorde capital ships. Its hull was matte black, swallowing starlight, no visible insignia, no broadcast signals. Its presence alone caused localized sensor interference. The vessel did not move toward Zelth space. It simply waited, watching. And somewhere, deep within the Concorde's ancient archives, long-forgotten threat assessment protocols quietly reactivated. The Zelth Combine noticed the ship within seconds. Every early warning buoy along their frontier lit up at once, cascading alerts flooding command nexuses across 6 systems. At first, analysts assumed a sensor malfunction, a phantom mass echo, a calibration error triggered by stellar interference. Then the readings stabilized. Mass indeterminate, exceeding known Zelth capital classes. Energy output suppressed, but baseline emissions alone rivaled a fleet group. Drive signature unknown. The vessel did not respond to hails. It did not broadcast identity codes. It did not cross the border. It simply existed. Zelth doctrine had no category for such a threat. They were not a warlike species by Concorde standards, but they were not naive either. Their strength lay in coordination, dense formations, overlapping shield networks, rapid response battle groups designed to overwhelm lesser foes before resistance could coalesce. This ship did none of the things an enemy was supposed to do. It didn't posture. It didn't advance. It didn't threaten. It waited. That alone unsettled the Zelth Command Council. Is it a decoy? One strategist asked. No, another replied. There's nothing behind it. Long-range scans show empty space. A weapon platform, then. Possibly, but why place it there? No one had an answer. The ship lingered at the edge of Zelth space for 12 hours, then 24, then 48. Trade traffic rerouted around it instinctively. Civilian vessels reported interference just from passing within several million kilometers. Long-range comms experienced delays, microlags that compounded into seconds, then minutes. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to fray nerves. Finally, the Zelth Combine did what all lesser powers did when faced with uncertainty. They appealed to the Concorde. An emergency session was convened. The council chamber filled with representatives whose species had watched the rise and fall of stars. The Zelth delegate projected the sensor data, the silent human vessel looming in holographic detail at the chamber's center. This is an act of aggression, the delegate declared. The humans have violated established deterrence norms. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Caro's representative clicked their mandibles in amusement. Aggression requires action. I see none. They destroyed our outpost, the Zelth insisted. The human envoy, older now than during the Caro's arbitration, lines etched into their face by years of quiet compromise, stood only when addressed. The outpost was non-military, they said evenly. Its destruction resulted in the deaths of 72 civilians. The Zelth recoiled. They were within contested space. No, the human replied. They were within recognized human territory. The council reviewed the records. The coordinates were clear. The Zelth had overstepped. Then issue a formal reprimand, the Caros said. This display is unnecessary. Unnecessary, the Zelth hissed. That ship alone could destabilize our border defenses. It hasn't, another delegate noted. You remain intact. The human envoy's gaze swept the chamber, calm, controlled. Humanity has exercised restraint for nearly a century of galactic contact, they said. We accepted unfavorable rulings. We withdrew from worlds we had settled. We absorbed losses because we believed coexistence was preferable to escalation. A pause. Our outpost was destroyed after we issued 3 warnings. No evacuation window was honored. No survivors were recovered. The Concorde listened, but old habits die slowly. What is it you want? The council moderator asked. The human did not hesitate. Accountability. A low hiss of derision spread through the chamber. You are a minor power, the Caro's representative said bluntly. You do not dictate terms. The human inclined their heads slightly. We are aware of how we are perceived. And yet you deploy this, the Zelth gestured toward the projection, to intimidate us. No, the human replied. We deployed it to observe. Observe what? The human's eyes did not leave the hologram. How you would respond. The session ended without resolution. The Concorde, as it always did, chose inaction. The Zelth were advised to exercise caution. The humans were advised to de-escalate. No sanctions were imposed. No enforcement measures authorized. Politics restored its familiar balance. Or so they believed. On the 3rd day, the human vessel moved. Not forward. Down. It slipped beneath the ecliptic plane, descending into a region of space dense with gravitational anomalies, an area the Zelth used as a sensor shadow to conceal military infrastructure. The implication was immediate and chilling. The humans knew. Zelth commanders scrambled fleets, forming defensive lines around their inner systems. Weapon platforms powered up. Shields flared to full capacity. Every engagement protocol screamed, prepare for war. Still, the human ship did not fire. Instead, it transmitted a single data packet. Encrypted, Zelth-compatible, no accompanying message. Against protocol, Curiosity won. The Zelth decrypted it. What unfolded across their command displays was not a threat, but a report. A detailed breakdown of Zelth military deployments. fleet compositions, patrol schedules, shield harmonics, even internal command redundancies. Information that should have been impossible to obtain. The final page of the packet contained only one line. "We see you." Panic spread. The Zelth Combine had never faced an intelligence breach of this magnitude. Their systems were ancient, layered, hardened through centuries of warfare. No intrusion alarms had been triggered, no cyber assault detected. Which meant the humans had not hacked them. They had observed them, physically, passively, completely. The human ship withdrew an hour later, slipping back to the border and vanishing the same way it had arrived, folding space into silence. The damage, however, was done. Within the Concorde, something fundamental shifted. This was no longer about a destroyed outpost. The ancient empires began reviewing old assumptions. How had humanity expanded without triggering conflict? How had their logistics grown so efficient without monopolizing resources? How had they endured repeated losses without fracturing? The answers, slowly and reluctantly, began to align. Humanity had never been weak. They had been patient. Their restraint was not born of fear, but of calculation. Every retreat had been a data point, every loss a lesson, every humiliation a test of response patterns. They had mapped the galaxy not with conquest, but with observation. And now the mask was slipping. The Karos were the first to feel real unease. Their seized human systems, once quiet, compliant, had gone dark weeks earlier. No traffic, no broadcasts, no detectable infrastructure. At first, Karo's command assumed abandonment. Then a scout vessel entered one of the systems. It never returned. No debris, no energy spike, no distress signal. Just gone. Long-range probes followed. They too vanished at a precise boundary, an invisible line in space where sensor data simply ceased. The Karos deployed a full reconnaissance wing. They watched as the ships crossed the boundary and dissolved into static, their quantum signatures collapsing into nothingness. The systems were not empty. They were sealed. And somewhere within that sealed space, something was waiting. The Concorde reconvened in haste. This time, the chamber was tense. The human envoy arrived last. "You are destabilizing the balance," the council moderator said. The human nodded once. The balance was already unstable. "You are provoking ancient powers." "We were provoked first." The Karo's representative leaned forward. "You think hiding behind clever technology makes you equals." "No," the human replied softly. "We think it makes us survivors." A ripple of discomfort passed through the chamber. "What do you want?" the moderator asked again. This time, the human paused. "Recognition," they said, "not as a minor power, not as a nuisance to be managed, but as a sovereign civilization whose lives carry consequence." "And if we refuse?" The human looked up. "Then we will stop restraining ourselves." Silence fell. In that moment, deep beneath the galactic plane, far beyond Concord charts, something ancient and human began to stir. Shipyards long thought, decommissioned, activated in unison. Vast structures unfolded from cloaked orbits around dead stars. Beacons lit that had not shone since humanity's earliest interstellar age. The galaxy had mistaken quiet for weakness. It was about to learn the cost of that era. The first thing the galaxy noticed was not the fleets. It was the silence breaking. Across human-controlled space, systems long dismissed as modest, unremarkable, strategically irrelevant, background radiation shifted. Gravitational constants wavered by fractions too small to alarm civilians, yet large enough to send Concord astrophysicists into quiet panic. Old sensors began earning new data, as if space itself had been subtly rewritten. Then the beacons ignited. They were not communications relays in any conventional sense. There were no encoded messages, no recognizable signals to intercept. Instead, they emitted pulses of structured gravity, slow, rhythmic distortions that propagated through hyperspace itself. Every advanced civilization felt it. Ancient navigational charts, kept more out of tradition than necessity, flickered with forgotten symbols reappearing where blank space had once been marked. Trade guilds rerouted traffic instinctively, driven by algorithms that suddenly identified those regions as non-viable. Military AIs flagged them as high-risk exclusion zones. Human space was expanding without moving. And at its heart, the shipyards awakened. The Concorde had catalogued humanity's visible industrial capacity as limited. A handful of orbital yards, predictable output, no megastructures. That assessment was catastrophically wrong. Humanity had built differently. Their greatest shipyards were not clustered around living stars or wealthy cores. They orbited dead suns, brown dwarfs, and collapsed remnants, places most species considered economically useless. Cloaked within gravitational noise, powered by tapped singularities and controlled fusion wells, they had worked in silence for decades. Now they opened. From the shadows of collapsed stars emerged hulls the size of cities. Layered armor plates slid into place with the inevitability of tectonic movement. Engine cores flared, not with bright, wasteful displays, but with controlled intensity, their output bending spacetime in elegant, terrifying curves. Thousands of ships powered on. Not rushed, not chaotic, synchronized. Each vessel slotted into formation with mathematical precision, their collective mass altering local gravity wells. These were not fleets designed for show. They were instruments, purpose-built, modular, adaptable. And they were moving. The first destination was Caro's space. The Caro's empire had not known fear in generations. Their military doctrine was built on overwhelming force and ritualized dominance. When their sensors detected the human armada assembling at the edge of sealed systems, their response was immediate and absolute. All battle groups were recalled. Planetary shields raised. Citadel weapons primed. The Caros expected a charge. What they received was something far worse. The human fleets stopped at the border. Then space changed. Invisible fields expanded outward from the human formation, intersecting Caro's sensor arrays and weapon systems alike. Not jamming, not interference. Suppression. Caro's targeting solutions degraded. Shield harmonics fell out of phase. Hyperlane access collapsed into unusable turbulence. Their empire, built on rapid, decisive strikes, was suddenly immobile. A transmission cut through the confusion. Human clear, unencrypted. This is a limited action. The words were not a threat. They were a warning. The human fleets advanced slowly. Caro's commanders ordered fire. The first volleys never reached their targets. Kinetic slugs lost cohesion, disintegrating mid-flight as space-time shear tore them apart. Energy weapons bent, refracted, or simply vanished into localized null zones. Human ships did not return fire immediately. They moved closer. When they finally did fire, it was surgical. No planet killers, no indiscriminate bombardment. Instead, precision strikes severed command nodes, power relays, and shipyard anchors. Caro's capital ships found their drives disabled, their weapons cold, their crews alive but helpless. Within hours, the Caro's war machine, feared across half the galaxy, was paralyzed. The Concorde watched in stunned silence. "This violates every convention," one delegate whispered. "No," another replied slowly, "it exposes them." Humanity was not waging war as the galaxy understood it. They were enforcing consequence. As the Caros reeled, panic rippled outward. Empires that had once dismissed humanity began scrambling to reassess borders, recall fleets, fortify systems that had not seen conflict in millennia. Too late. The Zelth Combine received their reckoning next. Unlike the Caros, the Zelth attempted negotiation. They transmitted apologies, offered reparations, disavowed the outpost commander responsible for the bombardment. The human response was swift but restrained. A single task force entered Zelth space. It bypassed border defenses entirely, translating directly into high orbit above the Zelth capital world. The planet's population watched as the human ships appeared, silent, massive, unignorable. Orbital defense grids locked on and immediately lost target resolution. Shields flickered, then stabilized at reduced capacity. A transmission broadcast to every Zelth city. "You destroyed an outpost and 72 lives. This is the cost." The human ships fired. Not at the planet, at the infrastructure that sustained Zelth military dominance. Shipyards crumpled under focused gravitational collapse. Fleet depots were rendered inert, their reactors safely shut down but permanently fused. Command satellites fell from orbit like dying stars, burning up harmlessly in atmosphere. When it was over, the Zelth still had a world. They no longer had an empire. Across the Concorde, fear metastasized into something deeper. Understanding. Humanity had not built weapons of terror. They had built systems of control. They could end civilizations and chose not to. That choice terrified the ancient powers more than annihilation ever could. The Concord convened again, emergency protocols abandoned in favor of raw urgency. The human envy stood before them, no longer small in the chamber's perception. "You are dismantling the established order," the moderator said, voice strained. "The order was built on selective consequence," the human replied. "We are correcting that." "What happens when another species defies you?" the Karos demanded bitterly. The human met their gaze. "We respond proportionally, as we always have. And if they escalate?" A pause. "Then they will learn why we spent so long preparing." The chamber fell silent. Reports flooded in even as the session continued. Human fleets were not occupying territory. They were withdrawing after each action, leaving behind demilitarized regions and enforceable exclusion zones. They were not conquering. They were reshaping the rules. Deep within human space, a final contingency activated. A structure older than the Concord itself, constructed before humanity had ever revealed itself, powered on. Its purpose was not war. It was declaration. And as its signal began to propagate, bending hyperspace into a single, galaxy-spanning broadcast, the Concord realized the final truth. Humanity had never asked for permission to exist. They had waited for the galaxy to decide whether their existence mattered. The galaxy had answered. The broadcast did not arrive as sound or image. It arrived as certainty. Across every hyperlane, every relay, every ancient listening post, still half forgotten in the dark between stars, reality itself seemed to pause, just long enough for the message to be understood. Not translated. Understood. The structure that transmitted it was older than humanity's first extrasolar colony, older even than the Concord's earliest recorded session. It had been built in secrecy, assembled over generations by a species that assumed, correctly, that one day restraint would fail. The signal carried no threat. It carried context. A complete record of human contact with the galaxy, every treaty honored and violated, every withdrawal logged, every ignored appeal, every destroyed colony, outpost, and ship, catalogued with time, coordinates, and causal chains. Not accusation. Evidence. The Concord's archivists, their long-dormant analytical AIs fully awakened, processed the data in stunned silence. Cross-referencing centuries of records, they reached the same conclusion independently. Humanity had complied with galactic norms far beyond any reasonable expectation, and had been punished for it. The broadcast ended with a single statement, calm, unadorned, impossible to misinterpret. Restraint is not weakness. It is a choice. And choices can change. The effect was immediate. Empires that had mobilized fleets halted them mid-translation. Border skirmishes evaporated as patrols withdrew. Trade guilds suspended operations in contested regions, suddenly aware that old assumptions no longer applied. The Concorde, for the first time in its ancient history, faced a civilization that had not risen by conquest, but by endurance. The Caro's empire capitulated within days. Their surrender was not ceremonial. No kneeling delegates, no dramatic displays of contrition. Instead, they transmitted a simple acknowledgement of wrongdoing and returned every human system they had seized, intact, evacuated, and untouched. Human inspection, fleets confirmed compliance. The Zelth Combine followed, offering reparations not in resources, but in access, opening archives, technologies, and hyperspace routes once hoarded as strategic leverage. Humanity accepted some, declined others. The galaxy watched carefully. The greatest fear among the Concorde was not human aggression. It was human judgment. What would a species capable of dismantling empires choose to do next? The answer came slowly, deliberately. Human fleets did not expand their territory. They did not install governors or impose cultural mandates. Instead, they established something unprecedented. A framework. Neutral corridors enforced not by treaties, but by presence. Demilitarized systems protected by human oversight. Dispute resolution zones where conflicts were frozen, not through threat of annihilation, but through guaranteed intervention. When violence erupted, human ships appear. Red. When peace held, they vanished. Their technology, once hidden, was shared selectively. Defensive systems, early warning arrays, infrastructure stabilizers designed to prevent the kind of unchecked escalation that had defined galactic history. Some empires resisted. They learned quickly. A single demonstration, measured, precise, was enough. The Concorde itself changed. Its ancient hierarchy, built on the inertia of power, was rewritten, not dismantled but corrected. Representation was reweighted. Arbitration gained enforcement. Consequence, once reserved for the weak, became universal. And humanity took a seat among them, not at the center, not above, but unignorable. The human envoy, now an architect of the new order, addressed the council one final time. We did not return with wrath because we desired it, they said. We returned with it because the galaxy taught us it was the only language taken seriously. A pause. But understand this, we are not here to rule. We are here to ensure that no species has to prove its right to exist through extinction-level force. The chamber, filled with beings who had once scoffed at humanity's quiet persistence, listened without interruption. Beyond the council walls, the galaxy adjusted. Trade stabilized. Borders hardened not through fear, but predictability. Young civilizations expanded under watchful protection rather than predation. Old empires, stripped of unchecked dominance, rediscovered diplomacy not as a courtesy, but as necessity. And humanity. They went home. Their fleets returned to the shadows of dead stars, their shipyards dimmed, their great structures powered down, not dismantled, but ready. Because restraint, they knew, was not permanent. It was maintained. In the centuries that followed, Historians would argue over the moment the galaxy truly changed. Some would point to the first human dreadnought emerging from silence, others to the collapse of the Caro's war machine or the broadcast that bent hyperspace itself into testimony. But among humans, the moment was simpler. It was the day they stopped asking to be left alone and chose, instead, to make the galaxy listen. Not with rage, but with consequence.